This is an untested recommissioning attempt. If it fails, nothing will happen. But if it works, hopefully your memories will be returned to you. Insert logo and dramatic opening music here. Codename Kids Next Door finished its run on television with a movie in 2008. However, if you have not seen the show and are interested in doing so, please be aware that this video will contain spoilers. Several years ago, a show went on the air called Codename Kids Next Door. This was an attempt by undercover agents to expose children to the reality of the war on kids. In 2008, the show completed its primary mission, and plans were made to go over more advanced battle strategies in a show involving the galactic Kids Next Door. Unfortunately, adult operatives caught on to the true meaning of this cartoon, and it was shut down before it even began. Codename Kids Next Door is of course a cartoon, and many adult agents would argue on that basis that it has no place in reality. However, the show is actually a coded message, so today I will be interpreting the cartoon aspects and translating them to real life. Of course, in order to get by adult censorship, the show had to be able to pass as just a cartoon, which means that certain aspects are rather cartoonish, and we need to understand those in order to get a proper interpretation. For example, most things in the show are universally recognized by children and adults as good or bad. For example, candy and playtime are universally recognized by children and adults as being good, whereas homework and dentist appointments are universally recognized by children and adults as being bad. Of course, there are exceptions. For example, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are recognized as children food, while liverwurst sandwiches are recognized as adult food. Once we understand this basic building block of the show, we can see that there are basically two types of adult villains. Now note that saying adult villain is not redundant. There are good adults and there are villainous children, and I'll get to all that later, but for now I'm just looking at the two types of adult villains. There's, on one end of the spectrum, the adult who is looking out for him or herself with no attention to the children. An example of this would be Sticky Beard, who wants to steal all the candy for himself, even from children. However, he will work with the children if it will get him a net gain. This is the type of villain who is looking out for himself, doesn't care about anyone else. The opposite end of the spectrum has someone like Night Brace, who wants to schedule dentist appointments for all of the children. He also wants to destroy all candy, all sugary cereals, and so on. He doesn't want these things for himself, even though they are recognized as good. He just wants to keep them away from the children. He is the type of villain who is only focused on the children and putting them down. He is not interested in building himself up in any way. Of course, we need to keep several things in mind when we translate this into reality. The first thing that we need to keep in mind is that most of the adult villains within the show fall somewhere on the spectrum within here. They will primarily exhibit one trait, but they will not exhibit only that trait. They will have a piece of the other in themselves. Of course, the second thing to remember is that adults in reality do not classify themselves as anti-child villains. I mean, there are very few adults who actually hate children, who actually try to put children down. So how do these classifications within the show transfer to reality? Well, we can look first at another example of a villain within the show who basically wants to bubble wrap everything. He wants to make things safe for children. He has the best of intentions, but he is going way too far. Now keep in mind, there are good adults who do want to keep children safe within the show. Safety is not seen as a bad thing in the show, but this particular adult is going so ridiculously over the top far that he is seen as a villain. Now, the other kind of villain is actually far more common, both in the show and in reality, which is the kind that is looking out for him or herself. Now, the adult villains in the show do things like make children eat broccoli because they don't want to eat the broccoli, so having the children dispose of it for them helps them out. They're thinking only about themselves. But in reality, this is far more subtle. It's less to do with, I am going to make you do this to help me, and more about putting children down because you just don't think about them. It's like if a child says something true, saying, "Oh, how cute," but if an adult says the same thing, saying, "Oh, that is so wise." The issue is that because adults have their own interests and their own desires, they forget what it was to be a kid, and the show explains this with decommissioning. On an operative's 13th birthday, they have all of their memories erased of the time that they were in the kids next door. At this point in time, an operative becomes a neutral teenager. Now, there are 3 alignments within this series. There are good, neutral, and evil, and these apply to kids, teenagers, and adults. Now, teenagers generally work with the adults. However, the adults also, in a sense, kind of look down on the teenagers and still view them as children. But remember that each of these 3 alignments counts to all 3 of the different age groups. It is also important to note that the show primarily focuses on the good children fighting the evil adults, but it is clarified throughout the show that this is not what's going on exclusively. They say specifically within the show, we don't fight adults, we fight evil adults. Most adults are considered to be neutral, and this is true of also the teenagers and the children who are not operatives in the kids next door. Most of the characters within the show are neutral. We just don't see them because that's not where the action is. Parents are included in this neutral category. They are generally portrayed as being a bit cheesy, but generally trustworthy and, in a sense, on the same side as the children. They definitely care about the children. So the show does not portray parents as being some evil lunatics. But here's the question. There are neutral kids and teenagers and adults, but why would there be evil children within the show? And why would there be good teenagers and adults if they had their memories erased of being KND operatives? Well, because there are fewer evil children than there are good adults, I will focus on that area first. These children who are evil are the ones who have been twisted and mutated in such a way that they think that it is proper for adults to look down upon children and even try to harm them. And they look forward to the day when they will become adults and can look down upon children themselves. This is as opposed to the neutral children who just kind of accept things as this is the way it is, there's nothing I can do to change it, and the good children who say, no, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. Of course, it's a bit more complex to answer how there can be good teenagers and adults if they had their memories erased after being decommissioned from the kids next door. The answer to this is that they aren't actually all decommissioned. Now, there is, of course, the big ceremony, and they go to the other room where the machine is supposed to erase their memories, and they come out, and they're acting like a normal teenager now. So you think, well, they must have become a neutral teenager now, and the hope is that they will not be recruited by the evil teenagers or the evil adults. But the exceptional agents in the kids next door are actually allowed to keep their memories. If they have shown dedication to the cause, if they have shown that they are not going to, as they get older, convert and switch sides, then they may be allowed to stay on as undercover operatives. And in this way, learning and growing up are not portrayed as bad things in the series. The decommissioned adults who have been recommissioned, or the people who were never decommissioned in the first place, are some of the most respected characters in the series, and the good children are always going to the teenagers and the adults who are undercover agents for advice. Or should I say not always, but in the episodes where they come up, they are highly respected. They are still seen as the best of the best because they are so experienced. Learning is not portrayed as a bad thing. What's portrayed as a bad thing is looking down on children as saying, because I am older, I am better than you. Now, unfortunately, as it turns out, reality is oftentimes very similar to the way things work within the show, which means that teenagers, and even more so adults, do not simply learn and grow, but rather they start to see themselves as better than children. They start to see themselves as having a higher place in humanity, and they would never actually say this, but this is how they start to act. This is how they start to think. This video is an untested recommissioning attempt. If you are a decommissioned operative, hopefully this video will allow you to regain your memories of childhood. This will allow you to help children to learn and to grow in a manner that is beneficial without looking down upon them. End transmission.